A few days ago, I received a comment on one of my videos. It was from a trader. He said he's been trading for 30 years. 30 years. And his comment? Mark Douglas is garbage. Trading psychology doesn't work. It's all bullshit. Now, most creators would delete that comment or respond defensively. You just don't get it. Maybe you're not applying it correctly. But I didn't, because when I read that comment, I didn't feel attacked. I felt something else. Sadness. Not for me, for him. Because here's what I saw. A man who has spent 3 decades in the market. 3 decades of charts, trades, losses, wins. 3 decades of hope, frustration, hope again, frustration again. And after all that time, he still feels lost. That's not a hater. That's a tragedy. And today, I'm going to explain why Mark Douglas doesn't work for traders like him. Not because Mark Douglas is wrong, but because there are prerequisites. And when those prerequisites aren't met, the best psychology in the world sounds like noise. So if you've ever tried to apply trading psychology and felt like it doesn't work, this video is for you, because it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to understand why. Before we talk about why Mark Douglas fails for some traders, we need to understand the 4 stages that prevent learning. These aren't just trading problems. These are human problems. And once you see them, you'll recognize them everywhere. Stage 1. Unprocessed trauma. Most traders don't realize they're carrying trauma. They think, I'm fine. I just had some bad trades. But trauma isn't about the size of the loss. It's about whether you processed it. Here's the difference. A processed loss is something you reviewed, accepted, learned from, and moved on. An unprocessed loss is something you buried. You didn't want to think about it, so you pushed it down and told yourself, I'll do better next time. But here's what happens when you bury a loss. It doesn't disappear. It becomes a wound. And every new loss touches that wound. And every time it's touched, the pain gets worse. So a trader who's been losing for 5 years, he's not carrying 5 years of losses. He's carrying 5 years of unprocessed wounds. And when someone like Mark Douglas says, be emotionally neutral, the wounded trader hears, stop caring about your pain, which feels impossible because the pain is all he knows. Stage 2. Ego defense mechanism. Now here's where it gets psychological. When the ego feels threatened, it has 2 options: adapt or defend. Adapting means, I was wrong, I need to change. Defending means, I'm not wrong, the world is wrong. And which one feels safer? Defending. Because adapting means admitting, I wasted years. I could have done this differently. And that's too painful for the ego to accept. So instead, the ego defends. It says, Mark Douglas doesn't work. Trading psychology is bullshit. These gurus don't know what they're talking about. And suddenly, the trader isn't wrong. The system is wrong. The teachers are wrong. The market is wrong. And the ego? Safe, protected, unchanged, but also stuck. Stage 3. Confirmation bias. Once the ego decides, this doesn't work, the brain goes into search mode. It starts looking for evidence. And here's the thing about evidence. You always find what you're looking for. If you believe trading psychology doesn't work, You'll find every example of a trader who followed Mark Douglas and still lost. You'll ignore the thousands who succeeded. You'll dismiss them as lucky or different. This is confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. The trader isn't lying. He genuinely believes he's tried everything. But what he's actually done is tried everything except the one thing that would work, letting go of the belief that he already knows. Stage 4, the shame spiral. And here's the final stage, the one that traps traders forever: shame. After years of losing, the trader feels ashamed. Ashamed that he's not profitable. Ashamed that he's still struggling. Ashamed that he can't figure it out. And shame. Shame makes you hide. So he stops asking for help. He stops admitting he doesn't know. He stops being vulnerable. Because vulnerability means, I failed. And he's been failing for so long, he can't admit it one more time. So instead, he rejects. He says, I don't need help. The help is bad. Mark Douglas is garbage. And the cycle continues. Trauma, ego defense, confirmation bias, shame. 4 stages, and most traders don't even realize they're in them. So let's talk about Mark Douglas. Specifically, why his psychology works for some traders and not for others. It's not because Mark Douglas is wrong. It's because there are prerequisites, conditions that must be met before the psychology can land. Think of it like this. Mark Douglas is teaching you how to run a marathon. But if your knee is broken, running advice doesn't help. Not because the advice is bad, but because you're not ready to run yet. So what are the prerequisites? Prerequisite 1. You must accept that you don't know. This sounds simple, but it's the hardest thing a trader will ever do. Because accepting that you don't know means, I've been wrong, for years. And the longer you've been trading, the harder this is. A trader with 6 months of experience can say, I'm still learning. No shame in that. But a trader with 30 years? Saying, I don't know, feels like admitting, I wasted 30 years. And the ego will do anything to avoid that admission. So instead, the trader says, I know. I just need the right system, the right indicator, the right strategy. And he keeps searching for 30 years. But here's the truth. You don't need a new system. You need to unlearn what you think you know. And that requires humility. Prerequisite 2. You must be willing to become an amateur again. Mark Douglas talks about thinking in probabilities, about emotional neutrality, about process over results. But here's what that actually means. You have to trade like a beginner. You have to take small size. You have to follow rules rigidly. You have to journal every trade. You have to admit when you're wrong, immediately. And for a trader who's been in the market for decades, this feels humiliating. He thinks, I've been doing this for 30 years. I shouldn't need training wheels. But that's exactly why he's stuck. Because he never built the foundation. He skipped to advanced tactics. And now his entire trading identity is built on a broken base. To fix it, he has to tear it down and start over. And most traders won't do that. Prerequisite 3. You must process your losses. This is the one nobody talks about, but it's the most important. Mark Douglas says, a loss is just feedback. It's neutral. But that only works if you've processed your past losses. If you're still carrying grief, anger, shame from trades 2 years ago, every new loss triggers those old wounds. So when Mark says, "Don't react emotionally," you can't. Because you're not reacting to this loss. You're reacting to every loss you never processed. And until you do the work of processing those losses, sitting with them, feeling them, accepting them, letting them go, Mark Douglas will sound like someone telling you to just be happy when you're depressed. It's not that simple. The truth about prerequisites. So here's the hard truth. If you don't meet these 3 prerequisites, Mark Douglas won't work. Not because he's wrong, but because you're not ready yet. And that's okay. But it means the problem isn't the psychology. The problem is the readiness. Now let's talk about the trader who left that comment, the one with 30 years of experience. I don't think he's wrong to say, Mark Douglas doesn't work. Because for him, it doesn't. And here's why. He's not in a place where he can receive it. He's wounded. And wounded minds reject healing, not because they don't want to heal, but because healing requires something terrifying: vulnerability. Let me explain. The 3 things healing requires. Healing from trading trauma, or any trauma, requires 3 things. 1. Admitting the wound exists. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. And for a trader who's been losing for decades, admitting, "I'm wounded," feels like admitting, "I'm weak." So instead, he says, "I'm fine. I just need a better system." And the wound stays. 2. Stopping the blame game. Wounded traders blame the market, the broker, the algorithms, Mark Douglas, because blaming feels like control. If the problem is external, then fixing it is external. You don't have to change. You just need the market to change. But healing requires the problem is internal, and only I can fix it. And that's terrifying, because it means you've always had the power. You just didn't use it. 3. Starting over. This is the hardest one, because starting over means everything I built, I'm tearing down. For a trader with 30 years, that's not just scary. It feels impossible. He thinks, I'm too old to start over. I've invested too much. I can't go back to being an amateur. But here's the paradox. Until he does, he'll stay stuck. The analogy, the broken knee. Imagine someone with a knee injury. He's had it for 10 years, never treated it, just kept walking on it. You say, you need physical therapy. He says, physical therapy doesn't work. I tried it once, did it for 2 weeks. Nothing changed. You ask, did you follow the protocol? He says, sort of, but it hurt, so I stopped. You ask, did you rest when they told you to rest? He says, no, I had things to do. Physical therapy didn't fail. He failed to do the work. But here's the compassionate truth. He didn't fail because he's lazy. He failed because he's in pain. And pain makes you desperate. And desperation makes you look for quick fixes. So he kept trying new treatments, never committing to one, always hoping the next would be easier. And 10 years later, the knee is worse. That's the trader with 30 years. He's not lazy, he's desperate. And desperation has kept him from doing the one thing that would work, committing to the process, even when it hurts. So here's the question. How do you know if you're ready for Mark Douglas to work? I'm going to give you 3 questions. Answer them honestly. No one's watching. This is just for you. Question 1. Can you review a loss without feeling anger? Here's the test. Go back to your last losing trade. Pull up the chart. Look at it. What do you feel? If you feel anger, if you feel, that was bullshit, the market screwed me, that shouldn't have happened, you're still in trauma. Because a processed loss doesn't make you angry. It makes you curious. You think, interesting, what did I miss? What can I learn? But if you're angry, you're not ready yet. And that's okay. But it means before you can apply Mark Douglas, you need to process that anger. Question 2. Can you admit that you don't know enough? Here's the test. Say this out loud. I don't know how to trade consistently yet. Can you say it without feeling shame? If you can't, your ego is still in control. Because admitting you don't know isn't weakness. It's the beginning of learning. But if saying it makes you feel like a failure, you're not ready. And that's okay. But it means before you can apply Mark Douglas, you need to dismantle the ego. Question 3. Can you follow a plan for 90 days without changing it? Here's the test. Think about your current trading plan. Have you modified it in the last 30 days? If yes, you're still looking for shortcuts. Because consistency requires, I commit to this for 90 days, no matter what. But if you're tweaking, adjusting, optimizing every week, you're not committed. You're experimenting. And experiments don't build mastery. Repetition builds mastery. So if you can't commit to 90 days, you're not ready. If you answered yes to all 3 questions, you're ready. Mark Douglas will work for you. Not immediately, but eventually. If you answered no to any of them, you're not ready yet. And that's okay. But here's what you need to do first. If you're still in trauma, you need to process your losses, not ignore them. Sit with them, feel them, write about them, talk about them, let them go. If your ego is still in control, you need to practice humility. Admit you don't know. Ask for help. Be willing to look stupid. Because looking stupid temporarily is better than staying stuck permanently. If you can't commit, you need to stop searching. Pick one system, one plan, one set of rules, and commit. For 90 days, no modifications, no exceptions. Do that, and in 3 months, come back to Mark Douglas, and this time, it'll work. Now let's go deeper. Let's talk about what's happening in your brain when you reject Mark Douglas. Because this isn't just psychology, it's neuroscience. The amygdala versus the prefrontal cortex. Your brain has 2 parts fighting for control. The amygdala, the emotional reactive part. It's designed to keep you safe. When it detects threat, it takes over. And its response is fight, flight, or freeze. The prefrontal cortex, the logical, strategic part. It's designed to analyze, plan, execute. It thinks long-term. When you're calm, the prefrontal cortex is in charge. You can learn. You can apply psychology. You can think in probabilities. But when you're wounded, the amygdala takes over. And the amygdala doesn't care about Mark Douglas. It cares about survival. So when Mark says, think in probabilities, the amygdala hears, lower your guard, be vulnerable. And it screams, no, that's dangerous. Last time you were vulnerable, you lost everything. And suddenly, you can't learn. Not because you don't want to, but because your brain is in survival mode. The trauma loop. Here's what happens when you trade with unprocessed trauma. Step 1. You take a trade. Step 2. It goes against you. Step 3. Your amygdala fires. Danger! Pain! Threat! Step 4. You react emotionally. Move your stop. Double down. Close early. Step 5. The trade fails. Step 6. You feel shame. I did it again. Step 7. The shame becomes another unprocessed wound. Step 8. Repeat. This is the trauma loop, and it doesn't stop until you interrupt it. How do you interrupt it? By processing the trauma, by sitting with the pain, by letting the amygdala know, we're safe, we're not in danger, it's just money, it's just feedback. But that takes work and time, and most traders don't want to do that work. They want a system, an indicator, a shortcut, and that's why they stay stuck. The good news. Here's the good news. Your brain is plastic. It can change. If you do the work, if you process the trauma, dismantle the ego, commit to the process, your prefrontal cortex takes back control. And when that happens, Mark Douglas stops sounding like bullshit. He starts sounding like truth, because your brain is finally ready to hear it. So let me leave you with this. Mark Douglas's psychology doesn't fail. What fails is the mind that isn't ready to receive it. And if you're watching this thinking, fuck, that's me, know this. There's no shame in not being ready. There are traders with 30 years who haven't processed their first year. And there are traders with 2 years who've already transcended. Time doesn't matter. The work matters. And if you're not ready now, that's okay. But one day, you'll come back to this video and you'll understand. Because you'll have done the work. You'll have processed the losses, dismantled the ego, committed to the process. And when you do, Mark Douglas will finally make sense. Not because he changed, but because you did. And that's when you become professional. Not when you win, but when you're ready to learn. So if you're not ready yet, don't force it. Don't pretend. Just acknowledge, I'm not ready, but I will be. And then do the work. Because the market will still be here when you're ready. But your time won't wait forever. And if you made it this far, you already have something most traders don't. Patience. The willingness to sit with discomfort. To hear hard truths. To not skip to the end. That's the first sign that you're ready. Or at least, getting there.